How for all you've done to your bodies. It's still real to me, damn it.
We cannot come on the air without that clip playing. It's Randall Cunningham from beautiful downtown Chattanooga, Tennessee. On my right and on my left is Hot Rod Jeremy Johnson from beautiful Sand Mountain, Tennessee. And on my right is Howie Cheney from beautiful Sand. Where you at?
Time out. Sand Mountain's not in Tennessee. Randall, what's wrong with you, man?
I was making a joke about Jeremy Pruitt. Beautiful Sand Mountain, Alabama. To my right, Howie Cheney in beautiful Sand Mountain, Alabama, just over from the Tennessee River is what Jeremy Pruitt said in his announcement at University of Tennessee. So we're going to have a lot of fun tonight. We've got a lot of good stuff going on. Join us as we shock the wrestling world and Howie Cheney takes over, because I'm going to go to being a guest. Cheney, take it away.
Hey guys, welcome to It's Still Real to Me with Randall and myself and Mr. Hot Rod himself, Jeremy Johnson. Glad you could join us tonight. Tonight's top 10 is going to be top 10 managers / valets. Now, it don't have to be a manager. It could be a valet. Whatever your criteria wanted to be, it could be a top 10. So we're just going to kick the show off with Randy giving his honorable mention there for about the first 5 minutes. So Randy, go ahead.
Instead of cramming like ties into my list, I'm going to do my honorable mention. Now, Jeremy, if I have one of yours on my honorable mention, we'll save it for later. But let's go ahead. And I just want to say a quick word about everybody on my list, because I thought there was a lot of deserving people. First off, I want to start with Oliver Humperdinck, the face of Florida wrestling for years. And the fact that he went to WCW as Big Daddy Dink and into the WWE. He was one of those regional guys that just didn't translate into like prime time. But in Florida, he was king. Diamond Dallas Page didn't make the list simply because it wasn't long enough. And I think of him more as a wrestler. Next guy, same thing. Paul Jones. Think of him as a wrestler, but a great manager. Howie and I are followers of Jim Cornette, so I got to mention Homer Odell. Jim Cornette talks about Homer Odell. When Homer got fired for Jim to take his job, he was scared Homer was going to beat him up the whole time. And he's just one of those old school guys. Slick from the WWE. Just wasn't there long enough. Should have been bigger. Loved his gimmick with One Man Gang. And who was it? They were the
Kamala,
yes. The Grand Wizard. Not many people know. Grand Wizard was also Abdul Farouk, who managed the original Sheik throughout Detroit and throughout all of his career. Robert Fuller, a.k.a. Colonel Robert Parker. How can he not make my honorable mention somewhere? Great character, but again, I think of him as a wrestler. Arnold Skolin, probably the weakest one to make the list, simply because he was 7 years Bob Backlund's manager. Dr. Ken Ramey, one of the creepiest human beings. Boys, I got to stop here. If there was anybody that deserved a regional title that should have been on this list, it's Dr. Ken Ramey. He managed the interns all through the territories out in California, but mainly in Chattanooga. He had a bow hair haircut. He carried a medical bag to the ring, and he was one of the most creepy human beings you've ever seen in your life. Big Bad John, another territory guy that died way too young. Miss Elizabeth. That might make some people's list, but she was probably my 11th. Looking out. Classy Freddie Blassie. You'll hear why he didn't make the list earlier. Saul Weingroff. One more shout out here. A Jewish man managing two German sympathizers in the 50s, 60s, and the 70s. Classic wrestling. Tojo Yamamoto, again, a regional guy, but we all know him. Crybaby George Cannon. He was a 400 and something pound manager back in the 70s that would cry like a baby. The best thing I could say, he was kind of like, what's Jim Cornette's best friend's name there? Howie, they no longer speak. Huh?
You talking about the great Brian Last?
No, who was the manager guy? I don't know. Adnan LKC, AWA's bad guy. Mr. Fuji, the manager, the only manager that couldn't speak English, let's just admit it, had to bring Jim Cornette in to talk to for him. Ted DiBiase, $1 million man, managed Andre, managed that whole $1 million corporation. Eric Bischoff, the manager of the New World Order, also president of WCW at the time. Rick Rude, the only man to appear on WCW Nitro and WWF Raw the same night. Sonny, God knows she could make the list, but she is such a train wreck I couldn't make it. How about Teddy Long, the manager of the Skyscrapers of Doom. And the last one from WCCW, Skandar Akbar, Devastation Incorporated. So many times he had run in with the Von Erichs. And Jeremy, I'm going to ask, did I have many of your on my honorable mention?
To be quite honest with you, there was a few. There's a few on there, just a few though.
Okay.
But your wrestling memory and affiliation is a lot bigger than mine is. So
I'm 57. I got a lot more history with it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
When I was doing my list, I came up with and I thought there was a reason to have everybody on the list.
Right.
I'm going to explain as we get into this. I didn't want to go WWE heavy because back in the day, they always had so many managers.
Right.
I didn't want to go WCW heavy there where they had everybody managed. So I tried to take the 10 people that led multiple people in multiple situations, and I penalized them if they were also a wrestler. Because if they're a wrestler character, it was hard to justify them as a manager. I had one controversial pick, and I think I'm the only guy that's going to rank him this high. But when you hear his name, you'll go, yeah, he did a lot as a manager.
So, so a lot of yours were on my kind of side list there, and I won't call it honorable mention, but I just made lists, and so I'll name off a few of mine. I've got, and I had him in my top 10, and I struck. I'll be honest with you guys, we could have did a top 10 valets, and we could have did a top 10 wrestling managers. And we could have filled both lists. So I really struggled here with that. But a couple of names: Sir Oliver Humperdinck, honorable mention; Skandar Akbar, Paul Jones, Gary Hart, Slick, and I've got
Dr. Star.
That's right. I've got Classy Freddie Blassie there. Just a few that I debated and that didn't make my list, but. We could have did a valet and a manager.
Yeah, we could have done a pre-WWE. And yeah, we could have done it a lot of different ways. Hey, I didn't mention a couple of people that I intentionally is not on my list, but I think they're going to be on your list. I didn't want to kind of spoil it that they didn't make my. One of the biggest managers I think in the sport does not make my list.
I know why.
Let's go ahead and get started then. Go ahead, Randy, with your number 10.
Well, I went ahead and threw him at number 10, and I will defend this choice till the very end because to me, he was the very best wrestling manager to exist. When I run the names out there and we start talking about it, you'll go, wow, I forgot he managed him. But how about the Army of Darkness and Kelvin Sullivan? And as you can see, at one point he had Oliver Humperdinck in with him. He had in Florida, he had the Army of Darkness. feuded Dusty Rhodes for decades. Then he went to WCW and he had his monster. What was it called? With the Giant and Kamala and Zeus and but between that he had the Varsity Club with Ted DiBiase. I mean, with Steve Williams and Steiner and
Mike
he.
Rotunda.
Yeah, he was always talking for the guys that necessarily couldn't talk. Uh, so even though he was active during all this point, he really got a stretch out of his career. Got a huge feud with Hulk Hogan, which I don't know late in his career, just solely as a wrestler, he even gets. I also, I'm going to defend this to the day I die. Kevin Sullivan never said the word devil worship, never said the word Satan. He never said anything but these abstract Buddhist. He went to a trip to Thailand and all those Tree of Woes and Mahakadeen and all that stuff was just stuff he simply learned over there. The wrestling fan just turned it into he's a devil worshiper. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the late Nancy Sullivan Benoit was launched under Kevin Sullivan, come woman famously in the WCW. That was Kevin Sullivan's ex-wife, and largely they said that Kevin Sullivan booked his own divorce with Benoit, but he touched so many. Managed Billy Superstar Graham, Jake the Snake Roberts, the Giant to the World Heavyweight Championship, the Varsity Club to the World Tag Team Championship. I wish Kevin Sullivan was around now. I love that character.
All right, Jeremy, you're number 10.
All right, so my number 10, I think it's if I'm remembering correctly, it was only a minute or two ago. Will be sensational Sherry Martell. All right, man. I've got her at number 10. I loved her character. Obviously, she wrestled. Obviously, she took bumps. But to name off a few folks that she managed that I enjoyed, and I didn't have the strict criteria that Randall had. I kind of reverted back to when we first started these lists. I just went with how they made me feel and their believability and all that. And Sherry it makes my list because of that. My favorite was her managing Harlem Heat, which one aforementioned Colonel Rob Parker was involved in that group also. But she managed Ric Flair, Macho Man, the little feud with involving Elizabeth. That was pretty cool. Very talented lady, and as with many of these, left us way too early.
Hey, I want to say that's great, Jeremy. She's on my list. You can tell. And when she gets there, we won't talk about her much. There's two things I want to say about her. One, our friend Pat Rose, managed by sensational Sherry Martell at one point.
Wow.
Two, to see her, she was older at the time I got to know her in WC. Didn't know her, but saw her and talked to her. She did a lot of work to make herself not attractive because she really was a beautiful woman in a lot of ways. And I chose this picture because it was kind of her, not with all the crazy makeup on and just in her natural form. And Jeremy mentioned all the big feuds, except my favorite, her run with the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels.
Yes.
Right when he turned heel, and he got the name Boy Toy from her.
Yep. Yep. And I was about to mention that, Randall, but I left that one off. But that little period with Shawn Michaels,
And a great
spent
wrestler.
time, and spent time in ECW, managed Shane Douglas in ECW. Worked in USWA. Worked with Savage there. What a again, really talented. I agree with you. I think a beautiful lady. Uh, come across a little crazy, but I think that was part of the gimmick
Was
for
I know
sure.
enough to know she was a little crazy, but she was actually a very sweet, beautiful lady.
Yeah.
She was older when I met her. She was older compared to what I was probably in my teens, and she was in her 30s. But I always thought she was just. She'd walk in backstage and she'd be just striking, like in a t-shirt and a pair of blue jeans. And 5 minutes later, she'd have some crazy makeup on, and you'd be like, "Man, I'm not going near her." But you're right, Jeremy. I didn't think you'd have her, but when you said then started the intro, I was like, "He's got my
So,
girl."
so So something to add right here, and she was actually living in McCalla, Alabama, at the
Yes,
time of her death, and so living, I think she was living at her mom's residence, and I don't know this for a fact. I didn't dig far enough. Was she a resident of Alabama? Was she born
I,
in Alabama?
she had grew up in like South Carolina, maybe, and
Okay.
but I think
Uh,
she was living in Alabama at the
yeah,
time. She
yeah.
lived in Tennessee for a long time when she was married for so.
So
And she does have a son. Not a lot of information about him on the internet.
yeah. Here's another thing about her. 49 years old when she passed away.
Drugs take so many people from this,
Unbelievable. But
and,
what a talent.
and I think it was accidental in her situation. I don't
Yeah,
think anything intentional about it.
I think you I think you're right.
All right, Jeremy, go ahead with your number 9.
Okay. This is where I really struggled, and I don't have a lot to say. I don't think I have to say that much.
Before
Uh
you move on, Sherry Martell was actually born in Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh,
okay.
yeah, nice.
Wow, awesome. So her death, she was died at her mom's residence. So that was in McCalla, so that's in between Birmingham and Tuscaloosa. So
I think
uh
her son actually lives in the Nashville area, but there's nothing on the internet about that.
yeah. So
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Number 9.
my number 9, this is quick and easy. I don't think we'll have to argue if we're combining valets and managers. I have it number 9. I'll be honest. I wanted to put this person at number 1. Uh, I have Stacy Keebler at number 9. I don't think I have to explain. Managed a valet for the Dudleys, valet for LOD, the Road Warriors. But that that's all I got to say. Roll
She was,
Tide.
she was maybe the most beautiful of all valets.
uh,
And has went to Hollywood and made quite a
yeah,
career for herself. And has dated celebrities and lives in that
yeah.
lifestyle. You also forget she was romantically involved with Ric Flair's son at one point for
David.
real. And David and her run a program at WCW. I think was her first real big break was that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I think you're right. Uh, very talented. Still looks like $1,000,000.
yes,
Uh,
Wasn't in WCW? Wasn't she part of like the IRS or something like that?
this fits in action with General Erection's the only one I can remember. Private or I know she did that. That was Morris.
Some reason I was thinking that she came out with somebody and she was dressed up in kind of like a woman's work suit.
They all dressed in like militaries. All I can tell you that. That's she was all over WCW.
Right.
And there's another one that she reminds me of that didn't make my list. But to me, and Sherry Martell is the only woman on my list. So I'll go ahead and ruin it.
okay.
Stacy Keebler and Barbie or Kelly
Yeah,
are two that are just model beautiful. And Kelly from Alabama also.
that's hard to believe.
Yeah.
Okay, Randy, you're number 9.
My number 9, and he is my one representative from this era of the 70s. And I cannot mention all the other. I've got to mention Classy Freddie Blast. Got to mention the Grand Wizard, but I think he's the most famous of them all. Captain Lou Albano, the University of Tennessee alumni. He got through out of Tennessee for cheating on a test, actually. But there were so many of those WWE managers back when it was WWWF. Everybody had a manager. They were all great. But Captain Lou kind of broke that rock and wrestling, Cyndi Lauper videos, played Super Mario on Saturday morning. He was just bigger than wrestling. He was kind of a social character or a cult figure. So I took him to represent that whole era. And Captain Lou's my number 9. And I always respect that he did get kicked out of the University of Tennessee.
Back to Stacy Keibler for a second. It was Miss Hancock who I was thinking about. She was there for a while.
Yeah.
So, all right, Randy, number 8.
Talked about her enough. I think I don't think she's appreciated. And I loved her with Shawn Michaels, and I also loved her with Harlem Heat. One of the greatest clips in TV history is when Booker T drops the N-word on Hulk Hogan in mid-interview. If you'll watch Stacy or Sherry's face at the middle of it, it makes it all. Nothing else to say about her except gone too soon. And respect, love, nothing else. Former manager of our friend, as I said.
Well, she was a pioneer as far as being the first woman manager that really got involved in the matches.
Took bumps. Former AWA World Champion, I think. Maybe a WWF World Champion. I don't know that. I know she was AWA World Champion. And she held every women's sync regional title.
But she was one of those, she was more than a pretty face. She got involved.
And that romance with Colonel Rob Parker or Colonel Parker was just classic.
Hi, Jeremy, number 8.
All right, my number 8, and I'll kind of it's just going to be repetitious, but I've got it, and I've scratched through 2 different people at my number 8, but I have to follow Randall's lead here. But Captain Lou Albano at number 8, and Randall touched on it. The I guess the beginnings of wrestling today.
Yes.
And the popularity, the mainstream attention, he was a part of that. I mean, you can talk Hulk Hogan, but you can talk Cyndi Lauper, and you can talk Captain Lou Albano, and all of that to me, Mr. T, all of that to me was the beginning of what we what we know now as sports entertainment. And what a big deal. What a personality. I mean, he has to have personality. He wore rubber bands on his face. You don't forget that, right?
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was fixing to say he made rubber bands popular.
Unforgettable. People that don't even follow wrestling probably know that name.
As kids, we was getting rubber bands and taping them to our face.
We did. I did.
Hey, I did have one story, that Lou Albano story I should have told earlier. He started his career as a wrestler, as a Sicilian, and him and his partner done kind of a mafioso gimmick, and it didn't sit well with some of the boys uptown, and that's how he became a manager. Was they kind of come and said, Lou, we need you to stop acting like a gangster on TV, and that's when he became Captain Lou. Captain Lou, the manager, and he managed like something crazy, like 20-something tag teams to the WWF Tag Team Champions. I always think of it with the Samoans more than anybody for some reason.
Well, I think of them with the Bulldogs.
Yes.
Wow. I've forgotten about that.
So, Jeremy, go ahead with your number 7.
Okay, I'm gonna talk about one that probably makes Randall's list. I never liked him, to be honest with you, because I thought he was super annoying. But I'll give you at my number 7, Jimmy, the mouth of the South Heart. There he is. Um, you know, most people associate him with Hulk Hogan. My first memories of Jimmy Hart associated with the Hart Foundation. What a great what a great faction. You got Bret the Hitman Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, the early beginnings of it, and Jimmy the Mouth of the South. And I'll never forget when the Hart Foundation won the title. That freaking megaphone played a huge role in them winning the WWF tag team titles over the Bulldogs, by the way, if I'm remembering that correctly.
You are.
So I couldn't stand him. I couldn't stand it. He talked all the time during the match on that megaphone, but what a heel. To me, I thought I liked him as a he. I hated him as a heel, but I enjoyed the heel character or persona much better than I did the babyface Jimmy Hart persona.
He's going to make my list much higher. So I'm going to reserve and tell you that when I get to my list, it's. I think he's in a group that's on the Mount Rushmore, and I will not even mention the WWF. So that's you've covered the WWF. I probably won't mention the WCW and his run with Hogan. I'll only talk about Memphis and how many times him and Lawler were selling out Memphis. But I will
Yeah.
I will have a Jimmy Hart discussion here in a minute.
All right, go with number 7, Randy.
Number 7 off my list. This is the one that I thought I kind of hinted at last week, and I kind of threw it out, and I was like, well, I'm going to have one that probably nobody else is going to have. And I thought I've got a picture of him here somewhere. I just got to make sure I find it. I guess I didn't upload a picture of him, but number 7 for me is the guy who I associate with just evil Middle Eastern wrestlers, the Great Muta, the Great Kabuki. I love Gary Hart, and he's number
Oh
7
wow.
on this. I could have went higher with him. I just want to run this down through your all's head. And this is probably I don't know that you know this or not, but I'm gonna shock you a little bit. The guy who booked the Von Erich and Freebird feud was Gary Hart. Not Fritz Von Erich, but Bronco Lubitsch and Gary Hart booked all that stuff. He booked all that stuff with Terry Funk in the WCW. But to me, he was best when he had a foreign invader that didn't speak, and he would back off in that corner and he would hold them there. Also, I will say this. People say the baddest, most dangerous man in the wrestling business was Gary Hart would cut you in a heartbeat. He evidently carried a straight razor, and if you done Gary Hart wrong, he cut more than a few people. He
Oh.
he was just a bad, bad man. And the wrestling business, he got into it in the 50s and the 60s as Playboy Gary Hart, and then become a manager much later. Again, I cannot think about Georgia Championship Wrestling in its heyday before WCW and not see Gordon Soley talking about the great Kabuki and his manager Gary Hart. I really, really, I could have put Gary Hart higher, but it was hard to justify any higher.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead with your number 6 then.
Well, number 6, to me, it's getting into slim territory. Now I'm going to go ahead and say it here. I thought about one hit horses. Who was the greatest one team manager? And then I couldn't come up with that. But what manager is most known for one thing? I came up with two names. One of them's off my list, which is Precious Paul Ellering of the Road Warriors.
Mm.
That's a great manager. But the one, I think the greatest moment for a manager with a short run with an elite group was James J. Dillon with the
Mm.
Four Horsemen. I think JJ fit the Four Horsemen. I think JJ was the perfect manager for the Four Horsemen. I think JJ also took it to a level of realness, where he talked about money and stuff, and he was doing it for all those guys. JJ booked Crockett with Dusty.
Yeah.
JJ booked Florida with Dusty. JJ was always Dusty's one-off guy, always his closest booker. JJ managed to other people after a kind of successful wrestling career, but that run with the Horsemen, it was hard for me to choose between Paul Ellering's run with the Road Warriors and that run with the Horsemen. But I also began to think about how much time the Road Warriors didn't have Paul with them. In the WWE, Paul wasn't there for the most of it. In Japan,
Right.
Paul wasn't with them. Paul was really more AWA and WW based, and probably a third of their career. That 3 or 4 years that JJ was with the Horsemen, it still lives today. Like your short, we look at that shirt and we say, "Hot Rod, Roddy Piper, greatness."
Mm-hmm.
You hold that up in any wrestling arena, and you automatically know.
Mm-hmm.
So JJ Dillon is my number 4, 5,
Yeah.
6, 6, 6, 6.
Number
Yeah.
6. Yeah. And Arn Anderson even proved it last night by saying 4 days away from AEW pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Is that good or what?
Good paper. We might need to talk about it next week.
So, Jeremy, you're number 6.
All right, my number 6. He managed under two different personas, one more famous than the other, but I have at number 6 one William Moody, otherwise known as Paul Bearer, also known as one Percival Pringle.
You
You
gotta have
can't
you gotta have an
go
impression.
ahead. Well, my Undertaker gets you. Also very annoying. But if you look and everybody remembers him as the Undertaker's manager, as Kane's manager, as Mankind's manager, but as Percival Pringle, he managed Rick Rude. He also managed one stunning Steve Austin,
Yeah.
uh, Lex Luger, if I do believe. Um, there's a long career. This is something I didn't know about him, and everybody knows that he actually was a licensed mortician. But he was born in Mobile, Alabama. But it was actually an Air Force veteran.
He was.
So he served in the Air Force. Um, but the iconic Paul Bearer character. What? One thing that I thought was really cool is that just like the Undertaker, kind of uh,
Stayed in character.
well, yes, and he changed over the years. He changed. He morphed a little bit. Paul Bearer also did not pretty subtle, but he did also. Uh, One of my favorites was, I guess, his last run in WWE, and I think they were feuding with Edge, and he basically, I think they rolled him off a dock or something, something crazy. But I loved Paul Bearer in that character.
Before you go any further, I'll just go ahead and number 5 is Paul Bearer and Percival Pringle. So when you come to me, my number 5 is going to be the same person as your number
Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
And I will tell you the only story that I was going to tell different than you. I don't think folks realize that Michael Purely Sexy Hayes and Robert Reuben Gibson, who ended up being Robert Gibson, and all grew up in Pensacola in the Mobile area. And they were all kind of buddies, breaking in the wrestling business together.
Mm.
I first got to know Percival Pringle off of, and nobody talks about it much, but during the WCCW big run, he was out in Texas with the Pringle Dynasty at one point. Kind of an underneath guy. And then he went to the place that the Global that replaced WCCW. Um, he actually left the business completely after that and went to mortician work and was at a funeral home when he got a call to be the Undertaker's manager, and he quit his job and basically loaded it all on 7-foot Mark Calloway, and not bad work if you can get it, but
Not a bad choice.
no,
So,
and I think he's very underrated as a manager. Oh!
so quick yes or no answer for both of you. Is the Undertaker who he is today without Purcell?
Maybe, but he played such.
Yeah.
There was a huge part of that. How much of his early career was wrapped up in that urn?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the first 5 or 6 years of Mark Calloway's WWE run
Yeah.
as Undertaker was wrapped up with
Yeah.
Paul Bearer in that urn, and it became a story bigger than life. Mark Calloway is going to be a star, but I think Paul Bearer kicked him down a long ways down that court, and a great prankster. If you've ever
Mm-hmm.
Google the Undertaker and cucumbers and what he hates cucumbers, evidently scared to death of cucumbers, and Paul Bearer would take cucumbers and put them all over in his equipment, in his bags, and just always. So yeah, great guy.
So let me along that same line. I want to ask this question. So we know, what he meant to the Undertaker. So the Undertaker was originally managed by
Brother Love.
anybody know?
I
Brother Love. How much different would that have been if had they stayed with Brother Love?
don't think they could because Bruce was so involved with the office. They
Hmm.
put Brother Love, and Brother Love's run in the WWE was short.
Hmm.
Great because Bruce Pritchard, as we all know, is been for 20 years very high up in the WWE.
Hmm.
Uh, it didn't fit. To me, it didn't fit at all.
No.
Paul Bearer fit. And my favorite time Paul Bearer story. Um, and if you've not watched the Rivals WWE Kane and the Undertaker, it's one of the best ones. And they talk about that period where Kane comes back and the Undertaker has Kane or has Paul Bearer, and he's just ragdolling him, and he starts screaming, "Kane's alive! Kane's alive!" And it's just such an iconic moment. It just that makes his career to me.
Yeah.
All right, Jeremy, go with your number 5.
I have at my number 5, and again, based off, my criteria, uh, I don't feel like you could leave her off the list. If we're talking valets, also, I have it in my number 5, one Miss Elizabeth. Uh, no words, not a mouthpiece, but what a
Grace.
what a pairing. I don't think she would have been what she was had it not been for her complete opposite, being quiet, reserved, beautiful, elegant, and you're paired with the wild man
Basically,
known as
her
the
her
macho.
being a human and Macho Man being him.
Yeah, I just it just worked because you usually associate, you think people need valets or managers because they can't talk, and you assume that, okay, the valet or the manager is going to be the man. She didn't have to. Facial expressions for her. I love the fact that they would key on her. They'd show her face. Her face just
She was
meant so much. Huh?
she was an actress. She could
Yeah,
have
meant so.
look than most people could with
Yeah,
words.
meant so much to the stories that they told. George the Animal, the feuding with George the Animal Steel. Uh, you know, gosh, Mega Powers. That whole thing. Uh, she's just. I don't know. I just associate her. If you say valet, she's probably the first person I think of is Miss Elizabeth.
Uh,
Again, very beautiful. Another gone way too soon.
she was number 10 on my list, and I just kind of put that talking criteria is the reason I took her off of it. And there's not an argument that can be made that Miss Elizabeth isn't a top 10 manager or valet. If she's 11 on my list, I probably have her lower. I do like, after they left the WWF, a little more of her personality after the divorce from Macho Man, and
Yeah.
it came out in WCW and some of the stuff she's done there, and you kind of saw a different style of her. They had been married since the ICW days, so
Right.
she was a college student at Kentucky when she met Randy Savage, and somebody on one of those WWE on demand programs said how two more opposite people looked at each other and found love no one will ever know.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Do y'all remember when
Uh,
he announced that this big build up to, hey, I'm going to get a manager. I'm going to get a manager.
They done
Then
it great.
mm-hmm.
he brought them all. He brought Jimmy Hart out there, Bobby the Brain Heenan,
Yep.
Blasty Freddie Blassie. Seemed like one or two more. Brought
Quick,
them out to the ring.
style.
Yeah, he brought them out to the ring. Did a match. He said, "Okay, I'm ready to announce it." And there's all waiting, and all of a sudden, her music comes out from the back, and there she is. She's the valet.
It was just a when you hear the stories now, it's sad what she lived through, and even
Mm-hmm.
her death. Of course, she was living with um, Lex Luger at the point of her death. If you look into the circumstances, and I'm by no means attacking Lex Luger, um,
No.
but she probably could have been saved with a little medical attention earlier that wouldn't provide it through what should have been a series of circumstances. But again, a purely accidental drug overdose, and I
Yep.
mean, still stunning, beautiful.
Right.
42 years old.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on from that real quick. It would be Randy's number 5. He already said it's going to be Paul Bearer. We already discussed that. So let's go with your number 4, Randy.
Okay, starting with 4. If you'll remember last week, I said 4. I could put any 4 in this group in any order, and I think it would be the 4 greatest managers all time. And I've already, kind of alluded to it, but let's talk about this guy,
No.
Jimmy Hart. 4. Um, and it wasn't just the run, and so many people only know about his WWE run. So many people only knows about his WCW run. This guy was actually, I'm going to tell you a little background. He was actually in a band called the Gentrys, was having hit songs was much like Seven Dust from Atlanta is for us, a regional band that had gone, national a little bit. He was a personal friend of Jerry Lawler, and he could talk, and they brought him in. And Lawler managed him up till 79, or he managed Lawler through Lawler's heel turn in 79. And Lawler broke his leg playing touch football. And one of the greatest stories ever heard, or I've heard, Jimmy Hart on Saturday morning on Wrestling brought out Precious Paul Ellering in Lawler's crown and said, "What do you do when one horse breaks his leg? You shoot him and you get a new stud." Come back 14 months later, and in his first match, accidentally broke Jimmy Hart's jaw from saying that. And I believe that was the accident of all accidents. He also was with the famous feud that they had with the celebrity from California. Oh, what was his name? Why am I drawing a blank?
Andy Kaufman.
Andy Kaufman. It was always Jimmy Hart and Andy Kaufman versus Lawler. Matter of fact, they had matches that was set up that way. Then he goes to WWF, and he does it right too. Jarrett said Hart gave him notice. He said Randy Savage and Jimmy Hart was the only guys that ever give him notice to what they were going to do. You also got to talk about Jimmy Hart was number one in Memphis, while number two was somebody else that makes my list. And Jimmy Hart was getting Evansville and Memphis and Nashville and Birmingham. And the other guy was running around Podunk, Arkansas and backwoods Mississippi. But he learned a lot from Jimmy Hart. Also, Jimmy Hart was the manager of one of my favorite characters that died way too young. Most of you've never heard of him. He's called the Dream Machine. He was Lawler's big rival in Memphis during the middle of the 70s. It was Troy T. Garham under this Dream Machine mask, under a mask, and he talked like Dusty Rhodes. So, he talked very, very suburban, that lisp. I don't know if that was a repum to Dusty Rhodes, but Jimmy Hart to me is Memphis, WWF, WCW, still booking shows to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Wrote so much of the music with Jimmy Johnson in the WWE that you hear till this day. So, meant a lot to the business.
Yeah.
All right, Jeremy, you're number 4.
At number 4, and I just realized this when I said that, and I looked down at my number 4. It's really appropriate at number 4. And Randall's already called his name, and that is one James J. Dillon. Don't want to spend a lot of time there, but I can't think of the Four Horsemen without JJ. To me, he's the maybe the glue, I guess, if you will, the glue of that group. I really, he was not just a figurehead manager. He was actually, he did manage a lot of their affairs and travel and
Very much.
yeah, all those things. He took care of it. So he was really a true manager, much like Paul Ellering was for the Road Warriors in his time with them. But Booker, behind the scenes, uh, I mean, talented wrestler. Of course, I remember him. What did they do? What did they do to him in the War Games match? What they injured him? Did they break his leg or?
Arm, I think it was.
They broke his arm. Why in the world he's in a War Games match at that point of his life? I don't know.
At that point.
Yeah.
You remember the famous night that Dusty and Nikita debuted the Superpowers, it was supposed to be Dusty and Magnum TA against Ole and JJ Dillon. So JJ Dillon took a horrible butt kicking from Dusty and Nikita that night. So
Yeah.
I was around
Well,
the WWE at that point, and I probably said that too, but very much so. JJ Dillon run that show of the Four Horsemen, and it was to the point where he took. I mean, he would tell you, go get so and so's bag and leave it in so and so locker, and he didn't want, especially Rick, bothered with those details, and he took them all off of it.
wow.
You
So
know,
in the truest sense, a manager.
Yeah, a little tongue in cheek there was Jeremy talking about he managed their affairs, and with Ric Flair being a part of the Four Horsemen, but he had to manage that one.
That's awesome, Howie. I didn't realize I said that.
So, Jeremy, go with your number 3.
at, at number 3, while I struggled, I wanted to say number 1, but he found when I pinned it down, he ended up at number 3. I don't think I don't think he's going to be on Randall's list higher, but I want to put at number 3 Bobby the Brain Heenan. And when I'm a kid and I'm thinking about wrestling, and I know Bobby had a long career, he wrestled, he, but I think about the Heenan family stable and the feud that they had with Hulk Hogan. I think about Andre, him managing Andre. Uh, he just, I don't know. I love to watch him bump. He was hilarious. The way he would take a bump. I loved how he dressed, but such a smart guy, such a comedian, but quick witted. I mean, some of the promos that he cut, man, unbelievable promos. And so I love I hated him when I was a kid, but in retrospect, I love that character that Bobby the Brain Heenan was, from mainly for me the WWF days. Great commentator in WCW, obviously, but that character Heenan stable, wow.
And don't forget about his neck brace he wore for 4 years.
Oh yes, I forgot. Yes, it's so good. I mean, just little things like that, man. So it's great. Wow, what a comedian.
I'm going to reserve my comments on Bobby the Brain for a little while. Is the Weasel the greatest Weasel nickname ever, though? So
Yes.
If I'm mistaken, I remember him being the manager of Big John Studd, and there was a big bounty out about slamming him.
Yeah.
And he's toting around that gym bag full of $10,000 or $50,000, whatever it was. So, all right, Randy, you're number 3.
Well, look, my number 3 is the one guy that's still really active, and I think he's the one guy that could get into the top 2. I think it's really hard to say right now he is, of the active guys, he is single-handedly the biggest name of managers in the sports today. Of course, he come off of a huge run with Brock Lesnar, now in a huge run with the Bloodline. A guy, many people still identify him with ECW, but he's so much more. He's been an executive in the WWE where he failed. He's been everything in every part. But when it all comes down to it, even though he's not a great businessman, when you put Paul Heyman on a microphone, it is pure freaking gold. If you've got a monster who can't talk, give him Paul Heyman. And I'd also like to go back to WCW and just mention the new Midnight Express feud with the old Midnight Express or Jim Cornette's Midnight Express. Great storyline. The Dangerous Alliance, which we've already talked about, hugely popular. Stone Cold, Rick Rude, Double A, Bobby Eaton, Larry Zbyszko, Medusa. He is also the guy who shaved Jerry Lawler's head in Memphis when he hid Tommy Rich under a ring. Supposedly, this is the story. Tommy stayed under the ring for 5 hours, a 6-pack, and a bucket to pee in the whole night, and him and Austin Idol come out and pinned and shaved Jerry Lawler's head. ECW, just revolutionary in sport. I wasn't the biggest ECW fan. I see why people like it, but I'm gonna be honest with you. It was gut wrenching not listing him higher than number 3, because if you talk about a moment in a spotlight, no manager has ever had a bigger spotlight the last decade than Heyman with Lesnar and Heyman with the Bloodline. 10 years of running as the number 1 spot in the sport.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So we'll go ahead with your number 2.
My number 2, I think, is going to end up being a long talked about, and we're all going to talk about the Cornette on your shirt. Hey, if you love wrestling, you love Jim Cornette.
Yeah.
He is a walking encyclopedia. He has done more and drew more money than, I think he's drew more money than any wrestler or any manager in history. And let me comp this by saying, I think people came to see Jim Cornette get his upendings for a decade and a half, not the Midnight Express, but they wanted Jim Cornette to go down. They wanted Jim Cornette to come off that ladder in that scaffold that night. They wanted Jim Cornette to bleed. They wanted Jim Cornette to pay the price. And also, talk about afterwards, he goes to Knoxville, starts Smoky Mountain with mixed success, launches the careers of a bunch of big-time wrestlers. But in the middle of this, they're sitting on a gold mine with, as I said earlier, honorable mention, and Fuji. I would not make him mad if he's still alive. The best ribber, they said, in the business. But you got Yokozuna, a Samoan, playing a Japanese character that can't speak English with a Japanese manager, which it's great on screen, but neither one of them can talk.
Mm-hmm.
So go add Jim Cornette as the American advisor, and you now have Yokozuna's run in the WWF. He never found his footing in the WWF again.
Mm-mm.
That NWA stuff where they brought in the Rock and Roll Express and Barry Windham, it didn't work. The new Midnight Express was horrible. But he was an executive and did much of the booking for the WWE was him and Bruce Pritchard during the time. I wouldn't say this, but Jim said it on his podcast. My God, he's the reason we had the Montreal screw job. I don't care what he says, but I believe his story that he casually mentioned just steal it away from Shawn Michaels to Vince McMahon, and that's what he went with. So, also, look, if you tell me you don't listen to Jim Cornette's podcast because you can't stand the politics, me and you probably agree. If you can't figure out how to fast forward through the politics and just get to the funny part of it, then you're stupid.
Yeah.
Because Jim Cornette is pure gold on podcast.
Yeah.
This is how smart the man is. His little running partner, Brian Last, can say like Harley Race versus Adrian Adonis, Jacques Goulet versus some French guy, and they go through the whole card. Cornette can then tell him reasonably where that card was held and what year that card was held in. And you think about, I do it with him, and I'll be honest with you, I think I'm pretty smart on wrestling. I get about 1 in 10. He probably misses 1 in 10. Yeah, I mean, he's just Just a genius. And angry, bitter, hates
Yeah.
wrestling. I guarantee he made more fun out of his wrestling career than anybody else. Hit more people with damn tennis rackets than anybody on earth. So Jim Cornette is number 2, and it's a shame, Jim. If you stumble across this, it's a shame. And I know you're retired. We can't get you back on TV for a short run with FTR. The world needs to see you with FTR before you walk out
Yes.
of business.
Completely agree. Completely agree with that.
Yes.
And
I would pop. I would pop for that.
I will drive my butt all over the United States to go see Jim Cornette
Yeah.
with the FTR one
Yeah.
time.
and in my opinion, probably the best talker in all of wrestling.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Not managers, but I mean wrestlers and everybody.
And that he's the guy that was out on the buttermilk run while Jimmy Hart was on the A list. He was in Memphis, and there's where he learned under Jarrett. And they were sending him to Podunk, Smithville, Arkansas, and then it was the famous trade with Bill Watts, where Watts got the Midnight Express, Jim Cornette, somebody else, and then Memphis got Rick Rude and a couple other guys. But that's what freed Jim Cornette up. First big run really was in Memphis. First person, best trivia I got. I'll let both of you answer it. First person Jim Cornette managed in the business.
Mm. Mm.
I'll give you a hint. Also on this list.
He didn't manage Heenan, did he?
No.
Mm-mm.
I don't know.
The first person that Jim Cornette ever was assigned to manage was in Memphis during her run in Memphis. The first person assigned to Cornette was sensational
Oh,
Jerry Martell, and he talks about it. He only lasted
wow.
a little while. He tried to bid his services out to all the guys, Dutch, Austin, Idol, and the storyline was nobody would take him. And Sherry finally took him as a manager.
Awesome. All right, JJ, number 2.
Well, we'll just continue the conversation because I have it my number 2, James E. Cornette. The only thing I really want to add to that is, he started out as a photographer,
Yes.
taking pictures at events and
His mama
hustled it.
driving him. His mama driving
Yeah,
him to the events. Mama Cornette.
yeah, hustling his way, to get into business. I think one of the things for me, and again, you hated him then, and like Randall said, you wanted to see him get his
Oh,
rear end handed to him. But the thing I appreciate is that everything he did lent to that. I mean, him talking about his mama's money. He came across like a spoiled rich kid. The suits, the attitude, just the carrying a tennis racket. For the love of God, you need to crap beat out of you just for that. You know, um, I I just just a great heel, and really as good as the Midnight Express were. I mean, without Jim Cornette,
never make it to the level they.
no. I mean, Bobby Eaton was a great wrestler and a great man. But he's not a promo guy, and Dennis and Stan, neither one of those are really promo guys. I heard a promo from Stan Lane the other day, and I was like, oh, you know, uh,
The Midnight Express and Jim Cornette had a special bond to where they all got paid exactly the same.
I
yeah,
was going to bring that up when you said it. Most of the time, a manager was paid a half share. So, like if you were managing that tag team, they would get 40%, 40%, and the manager would get 20%. Midnight
But
was 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And boys, are the Rock and Roll Express as big as they are if they don't have Midnight Express and Jim Cornette?
no,
No.
no.
Let's go back to the other day. We was talking about something. Well, we was talking about Roddy Piper instigating a lot of the Hogan feuds and all this other stuff. Well, if it wasn't for Jim Cornette ticking everybody off, all the other tag teams
Yep.
off, Express is not nowhere near what they are.
No,
Yep.
you're. And then even after Stan leaves, or Bobby stays in WCW, and then he takes Stan and Jimmy Del Rey and well, first I think it was Stan and Dr. Tom Pritchard, and then Tom Pritchard and Jimmy Del Rey. The Heavenly Bodies headlined it pay-per-views for the WWF and the WCW. You know, they were for the World Tag Team Champions. Sometimes I just wish Jim would let us love him, because he won't.
Mm.
He don't embrace how loved he is at all. I mean, I will tell you, he would smack me with a tennis racket for my political beliefs, but there is no more loved figure in the world of pro wrestling than Ric Flair and Jim Cornette. And I say it, but that's where he ranks. So,
yeah.
I agree with y'all. I would love to see him be the manager of FTR, but he would get in so much trouble if he said the stuff today as he said back then.
Well, you know, he was the color for the Billy Corgan version of NWA Power, and you know, he made a remark that he had made years ago, and that remark and the outrage, and then you know, social media is the bed of outrage now. That's what, you know, got him removed from that position, because I thought he was fantastic. And that version pre-COVID, before that happened to him, I loved. That was my favorite wrestling show at that point. My favorite, hands down.
The NWA was on the verge of something big.
Yep.
And unfortunately, back to that, Jeremy, they lose Cornette, and then AEW kind of raided them a little bit too.
Yeah,
they got MJF from, and you know, they left Alexander Hammerstein. Somehow he's still there, and Jacob Fatu. But yeah, I love that era of NWA.
Yeah, that's they're still, you know, hanging on, but I mean, he brought a lot to that broadcast, or to that team, and it was sad to see that happen, you know.
Jim Cornette goes even to a fan fest, and he can't enjoy himself for people that's close. Here's what's weird about it: people on the outside, fans, true fans, appreciate Jim Cornette now. It's people within the inner circle of wrestling that causes all the turmoil. Just like when he went to Cobalt to sign autographs and sell his merch a couple years ago, which is the last one I think he done. He gets in a fight with Santino Marella and ends up all over social media. You know what? If the marginal guys, or the guys that's got a grudge against Jim Cornette, just leave him alone. Let him be loved by the fans. He deserves that victory lap.
Yeah, he does. And politics aside, listen, I've listened to him rant on some, and you know, part of me, even though my first gut reaction on some of the things he says is, you're an idiot, you know, on that, having that opinion. But there's been a few of those things as I thought about what he said, and some of it actually made a little sense. Not all of it, very little of it, but you know, that aside, gosh, I love the wrestling. You're always
Here's what I say about the politics, Jeremy. It is well thought out, intelligent, and smart. I just happen to disagree and be on the other side.
Yeah.
It's not like he's just wailing from some back row. He's a smart man that's researched it, and that's how he feels. And it makes it And how he knows it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
But it makes it more bearable knowing that he truly believes this in his heart. And this is America, where we can all have a little different opinion.
Yep.
Jim Cornette has changed the way I think about gun control. 100%. The most Republican guy on the world. Jim Cornette starts talking about why do we need, and if you're out there listening, everyone that's hunting, you deserve the right to hunt. His point was, we need a bump rifle that'll fire 65 rounds in 1 minute. And I'm like, yeah, why do we need it? Why? So Jim Cornette says some things that make sense to me.
Yeah. When that was what I was referring to in particular. There was a few things that he said there that I'm like, I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, off the politics real quick. We all three agree that he could be one of the world's best stand-up comedians there ever was if he wanted to.
Y'all remember Iron Face in his first promo after Paulie had hit him with the phone? And he said his mama called him. And he's like, Mama, it's time for me to grow a set and stand up on my own. And it's just classic at that time.
Look, those ad reads that they do during his podcast, some of them are the best part because he goes way off on a tangent and last trying to get him back.
See, Randy misses that because he don't listen to the podcast. He listens to the YouTube version.
Yeah, I listen. Now, listen, if you don't want to hear the politics, they are there's like, you should go put in Cornette Omnibus, and there'll be 6 hours. He gets meticulous records about 1989. And I mean, he is so. I was in the bathroom with a chick when Stan knocked on the door and said he needed 25 cents. He never paid me back. I mean, it's that ridiculous sometimes.
And the one more thing, then we'll move on because we got our number one to do. But him going off on the lady at the Wendy's drive-thru is one of the funniest things I think I've ever.
Dairy Queen, dude. It's Dairy Queen, and that's Chris Jericho's fault. Have you ever heard his? That's on YouTube. He said Jericho was in the back, like needling him the whole time, and the video's recorded by Jericho.
Yes.
So, and Jericho had ordered a banana split with no ice cream and no. I mean, I think Jericho set Jim Cornette up that night.
He may have, but it's one of the funniest things I've ever saw. But
the best one is Chris Candido and Sonny was inside.
Yeah,
and the one of the old shoot interviews with Candido was like, all of a sudden Jim Cornette's coming through the drive-through window. No, so
yeah. All right, Jeremy, you're number one.
All right, so we are running all over ourselves here, but I have to put Paul Heyman at number one for my list. Mainly, and Randall talked about, his managing the Dangerous Alliance and, running ECW, the creativeness of Paul Heyman, what he has done in the last 10 years, maybe 15 years, when you talk about Brock Lesnar and you talk about Roman Reigns. And I love every part of what's going on. I hope they don't blow it with the bloodline and with him being the wise man. And I love how Roman refers to him as wise man.
Speak wise man.
Yeah. To me, this is one of my favorite. And I watched AEW. I mainly watch AEW. But the bloodline, Paul Heyman, and this how he interacts with Roman, I love it. How he hands him the titles, the belt, his facials, his just every part of it. It's Paul Heyman is a genius, and he will. I mean, they would do well to put someone else with him eventually.
So
You want to see a
here's
fat man move quick? Have Roman Reigns say, "Wise man," and he'll go flying towards him.
Yes, yes, my tribal chief. I love it.
Randy, go ahead.
No,
no, I agree with you. When I made my list, I still believe there's a top four. And
hmm
once you get to Heyman, if you say Heyman is 3, 2, or 1, I'm not going to
it's
argue. I
yeah,
When I got this high on the list, and Jimmy Hart was kind of my cutoff because I believe everybody below Jimmy Hart they were a clear define, and I
yeah.
think Jimmy Hart was kind of in his little territory. Then my number 1, my number 2, and my number 3, of course, being Heyman and Cornette, and my still pending number 1 was about feeling. That's the only
hmm
feelings get into it. Um,
hmm
I, I originally had him above Jim Cornette, but then I knew how I was going to gush about Jim Cornette, and I am a cult of Cornette follower, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna move Heyman down. But even then, I said in our thing a minute ago,
Yep.
he's still the only. While we were talking, I'm going to ask you, is he the only man in the wrestling business earning a living as a manager these days? I mean, I don't think he does anything else. Even Arn Anderson's a backstage booker. Everybody you come across is something else. Paul E is a manager. And I think he may be the only one that's making 6 figures doing it these days.
You may be right.
Doing
I
some,
asked myself that.
he's doing something back behind the scenes. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but yeah, as far as just straight up managing, yeah, I think so. I think
The reason
so.
there, though, is that 5 minutes on the mic on Monday night or Friday night.
Yeah.
Like, I guess the best manager in AEW wasn't on my list, which is Don Callis, which I thought would be a surprise since I'm
Eh,
such AEW
Yeah.
mark. But Don Callis might be the only other guy making a living off of being a manager. Don Callis is a great businessman, though, and I'm not
Yeah.
sure he leaves some time to do other things outside the wrestling business.
I gotta tell you, and you brought his name up, and it completely slipped my mind. But I love me some Don Callis.
Yeah,
I think they need to put him on TV a little more because I love his voice. I like how he carries himself. I like how he dresses, and that little stint there. It's kind of morphed a little bit. The little stint there when he was primarily Kenny Omega's manager
yeah.
and he had all the belts and stuff. That whole thing to me was excellent.
And you'll remember
Uh,
about 3 years ago, I went through 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I went through a huge New Japan phase. I credit a lot of that to Callis was on Callis was the ringside announcer. He was the
yeah,
voice of New Japan Wrestling at that point. And that's before JR went over there and a lot of other people. But Callis Callis suckered me into New Japan. And then that's what spun off to AEW now. I do like that they've turned him against the Elite, and now we're going to see how this Blackpool Combat Club plays out. But he may be the only other manager that's actually making, I don't know. So
He wasn't on there last night, and that kind of surprised me.
no, he wasn't.
I think something big's going on. So I would not,
Yeah,
spoiler, I would not be shocked to see him turn on the Blackpool Combat Club on Sunday during the pay per view. And all this was aroused to get him inside the BCC so that he could set them up on the pay per view.
but let me ask you something along that line though. But have they haven't really done anything to associate him,
No,
have they?
no,
Other
they
than he turned on him
and
on Kenny.
his interview was more about did everything for Kenny Omega, and he don't feel like so. You
hmm
don't He does manage the guy that's been in and out of the elite a little bit before the show. The young Japanese wrestler on AEW. He does manage
Oh,
Japan, so I do know
Ta-
that. So maybe
Takeshita.
yeah, maybe he shows up with him somehow Sunday or something.
Hmm.
Or as Mr. Cornette says, take a shit off.
Yeah, take
Yeah.
it. Let's go on.
All right, Randy, you're number one.
Look, there's only one person left and we've already talked about him. I just want to give his career highlights because we talked about the WWE. I first learned of Bobby the Brain Heenan in the AWA. He was the manager of Nick Bockwinkel, a world champion for multiple years. He managed all the tag team. So a lot of people say that death of the AWA came when Vince signed Hogan away. And I disagree with him. The death of the AWA came when Bobby Heenan left for the WWE. He killed the AWA because Bobby Heenan was the AWA up front. Vern Gagne had little to no personality, and he booked wrestling that really had only babyface heels, himself, Greg Gagne. Everybody was Mr. Nice Guy. And you've got one person that's kind of a piece of crap floating around doing everything. And it was kind of if you had anyone in AWA and you wanted to get them over as a heel, you put them with Bobby the Brain Heenan. Some of the best matches I've ever seen was those tag team matches, and it seemed like they had 50 of them, where if Bobby's tag team lost, he got put in a weasel suit. And it was just great. And him and Botwinkle, and we always talk about you put a manager with a wrestler who can't talk. Well, Bockwinkel and Heenan was more like JJ in the Four Horsemen. He added that level of more depth to it. Then went to WWE, managed Andre the title. I thought the pairing of Bobby the Brain Heenan and Ric Flair was great. I thought the pairing Bobby the Brain Heenan, Mr. Perfect, and Ric Flair was just genius.
Yes.
I'm a big believer in that if Kurt Hennig doesn't end up hurt during that period, we're talking about Kurt Hennig being a multiple-time WWE World Heavyweight Champion. We're talking about Kurt Hennig possibly having a spot on that Mount Rushmore. Then he goes to WCW, and what was it, 82 weeks they beat WWF. A big portion of it was Tony Schiavone, who's so underrated as a play-by-play guy.
Yep.
And Bobby the Brain Heenan, just the words were magic. And the greatest call in wrestling history. Bash at the Beach, Hall and Nash versus Macho Man, Lex Luger, somebody else. Can't remember who it was. It might have been DDP. So the only two real big faces that are not out there are Sting and Hogan. And as long rumored that it was either going to be Hogan or Sting to run the NWA. As Hogan is coming down the aisle, Bobby the Brain Heenan is still in character. He goes, everybody else is like, get you some Hulk. And Bobby Brain drops one little line. Who's he here to help? And it told the whole story of what was about to happen. It told the story that would go on for those 82 weeks of Piper coming to challenge Hogan, of Hogan about to turn on the Macho Man. And he kept saying during that interview, I told you for decades, I've told you Hogan was no good. During his last days, Bobby the Brain Heenan suffered from jaw cancer, and I can't not watch the video. Some people can. He can barely speak. Ended up losing all ability to speak. For Bobby the Brain Heenan to lose ability to speak, I think that would be like Florence Jordan Griffith losing the ability to walk, or Michael Phelps losing the ability to swim. Michael Jordan not to be able to shoot a basketball. Is he number one? I don't know. Is he number one in my heart just because the same reason of Cornette? I can feel bad right now, and I can go find one of those old gorilla. We'd be amiss not to mention Gorilla Marsoon. I can go find one of those old WWE before they had Nitro and Raw, before Raw ever exists, of him and Gorilla Marsoon sitting at a table just talking, and watch it for 5 minutes and have a smile on my face. That's what Bobby the Brain Heenan was. His story breaks my heart, just that he couldn't talk
Mm-hmm.
it. But
Yeah.
I said everything about the WWE run. But for me, it was Heyman is the hottest manager. Cornette is probably my favorite manager. And Bobby the Brain Heenan just kind of holds a spot in my heart. I grew up on Bobby the Brain Heenan, and he's kind of like Cornette is to y'all. Your first memories of wrestling, Bobby the Brain are kind of like mine. So, salute to you, sir. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What a
he was one of a kind when it came to announcing, and he kind of put to me, he was the first one I remember kind of putting the twist of taking it from being serious to making joking comments about certain things.
And he broke the fourth wall before anybody knew what it was. Do y'all remember him cussing Pillman out because Pillman grabbed his neck after surgery? He really had neck surgery, and Pillman, when he's doing his loose cannon, goes behind him and puts his hands on him, and Heenan thinks it's a fan, and on the air he goes, "What the F are you doing, Pillman?" So,
but yeah,
Oh,
1 through 4 could be interchangeable. I agree
yeah.
with y'all wholeheartedly, but 1 through 4 is 1 through 4.
yeah,
There's no, it's the Mount Rushmore of managers, in my opinion.
and that thing, man, and I honestly believe that 50 years from now, when they talk about 1 through 4, it's still going to be the same guys because the wrestling is not built for the manager anymore.
No. And that has cost it. That has cost wrestling because of the managers were what made him. That's what made certain people that can't talk, kind of like I am right now. I can't talk, but kind of like the ones that can't talk, they were their mouthpieces, and they got on them like they needed.
We didn't even discuss Harley Race, but where would Vader been in W without Harley Race?
Right.
But he could have never drew in America like he did without Harley Race, and that's what people did. The great Kabuki, as far as I know, or the great Muda, until his Hall of Fame ceremonies, never spoke in English. And Gary Hart said every word ever represent both of them in the.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
So along the lines of we throwing out people that we didn't make our list, and we were manager heavy and light on valets. But thinking about Crockett era, what about Baby Doll?
Deserves to be there. I mean,
what about Precious?
Yeah, you know what we ought to do one day? We ought to do just a valet list.
Well.
Yeah, because
we are to.
I never really understood the Baby Doll thing because I didn't really ever think she was just that attractive, but she was the center of quite a few storylines there. So
yeah.
Half sister Jake.
I don't know. I got mixed feelings on this. I don't know if you really call this person a manager or not, but the one that no one really mentioned was Virgil. And would the $1 million man really be the $1 million man without Virgil being the sidekick?
Well, it was words for me. And again, Virgil he like Elizabeth never gave anything but a look, and it was good.
Yep.
Hey, as far as that goes, early in his career, where would the Midnight Express been without Big Bubba Rogers? Same role, just
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So, well, gentlemen, next week let's go 1 through 10 with the NAA singles.
NWA singles. All right.
NWA singles. Crockett Promotion NWA singles 1 through 10. Unless,
Woo, it's gonna be tough.
Hey, I like that.
huh?
I like doing Crockett promotions. That's nice.
Unless AEW pay-per-view this weekend, Double or Nothing is off the chains, then we may end up talking about that instead.
Hey, I know we're an hour and a half in. Last thing I'm going to say, Punk showing up this weekend or not?
No.
Okay. Collision.
Hey, one thing, yes, but one thing I do know for sure, Moxley will bleed. I do know, guaranteed, Moxley's gonna bleed.
That's like saying, hey, I'm pretty sure Randall's going to get some food after the podcast.
Yeah. Hey, he may be bleeding when he comes through the crowd. I don't know. He may already be bleeding.
Maybe on Friday for the Saturday show. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
All right, quick questions for both
Will
of you.
all improved though. Golly.
Uh-oh.
Quick question for both of you. AEW World Champion, the 4 pillars. Who's going to take it home?
Go ahead, Jeremy.
I think you got to keep it on MJF. I really do.
I'm going to go a little spoiler here, and I think we're going to see a Jungle Boy heel turn, and somehow MJF keeps the title, but we leave there. I don't think you can turn Darby heel. I don't think they're ready. Sammy has flip-flopped so many times that he can't really flip-flop anymore. But hey, is it time for Platinum Jack Perry or Superstar Jack Perry or something other than I'm Jungle Boy. I'm famous. Let's do something with Jungle Boy Saturday and
yeah, and if he's the only one of those, the other, if they don't keep it on MJF,
I think they keep it on MJF. I do.
Yeah, but if they did, if they were to change hands, to me, Jungle Boy would be the only option. But I think it's good. Look, reflecting back on Crockett, the best time was when Ric Flair stayed the champion, and you had all the baby faces chasing. Dusty Rhodes, Ricky Morton. You go down the list. That's the best time in wrestling. I think it's better when the baby face is chasing that title. And for some reason, that stinking heel keeps the title in all circumstances. It's maddening, but I think it's good.
I kind of like Randy's idea of Jungle Boy turning heel and coming out with Anna Jay dressed all in black. That's just my thought.
Oh, Jungle Boy is screaming to do a Hollywood character. Think about a souped up Jungle Boy almost in a Ric Flair mode. I think it would sell money.
I think he's getting better talking. I think his promos are getting better, so might be a good thing.
Yep.
All right, guys, I enjoyed it. Great show again, as always. Jeremy, great seeing you again. Randy, you disappeared on us. I don't know where you went, but
hey, I killed it by accident. Hey, also, we in 2 weeks we're gonna have to do a show maybe about our boys' night in Huntsville and talk about us going to AEW House Rules on the 3rd. Maybe we need to think about something we can do there. Maybe even live drops on RiverCity-Media of it's still real to us, damn it. Huntsville on the 3rd.
Why not?
And who knows?
Sounds good.
Because it's also said something about Ring of Honor too, so you don't really know who's going to be there.
Hey, all I'm going to say is back in the D. Swain and B-Lo days, we used to have something called car cam when we were coming to and from a football game. I'm thinking car cam may come back to life after the show.
Well, unfortunately, if it's a car cam like it was when we came back from seeing Ric Flair's last match, all you're going to see me do is sleep.
That's right.
I felt bad for Jeremy having to back by himself, but I was out of it for some reason.
All right,
that was
man.
good.
So, Randy,
next Thursday, if everybody's in their spot. If not, we'll talk offline. Maybe we can get that show in the can. So, good night, everybody. For Allie Cheney, for Hot Rod, Jeremy Johnson, I'm Randall Cunningham, and it's still real to us.